Who said all? We've been running this past several weeks during the Lenten season. The theme of the I Ams. We started out, as Cheryl mentioned, with the burning bush, in which God revealed Himself to Moses and told him, "I am," and He said, "I am that I am." And what we came out of that understanding is that I am that I am. It was a statement of personal identity. God, for the first time in the stories of Scripture, identified Himself not just as the great creator of all the earth, but He identified Himself to His people as Abba, Father, Daddy. It was an intimate statement, and so Jesus, when He shows up on earth, He begins to share His identity with Christ by telling everyone in the world that were listening at that point, "I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the true vine. I am the way, the truth, and the life." And each one of those purposes of saying those was to say, "I am your God. I absolutely, unadulteratedly adore and love you." And He lived that lifestyle, and he reached, and he ended up doing many acts that showed His personal interest while He lived on earth. He fed the 5,000. He healed the blind. He caused the lame to walk. He invested His entire life on telling stories that had meaning, that was earth or applicable to the individual who lived in that world. Jesus demonstrated in His life that He was truly in love with us. And the great I am is not the great I am of obscurity and of a God that looks way up in the heavens, but the great I am is the great I am that came and lived amongst us. Now, this morning you saw in the order of service that my sermon title is "I am the resurrection and the life." It's the final I am that you're going to hear me talk about. But you'll find that I am in John chapter 11. Now let me set the stage. Jesus had been told by messenger that Lazarus, one of his best of buddies, one of his close confidants, the brother of Mary and Martha, was deathly sick. And Jesus knew that not only was He deathly sick, but He was on the doorstep of death itself. And Jesus said to the boys when He was with them, He said, "Guys, here's what's going to happen. We're not going to go right away. We're going to hang out here for a while, and then in a few days we're going to go see Lazarus, Mary, and Martha." By the time they got there, Lazarus had been in the grave for 4 days. I don't think you can get deader than 4 days in the grave. I don't think there's a way that you can be revived with 4 days of death under your belt. And so He shows up, and Mary and Martha, who were devoted to Jesus, they were followers of Christ, loved Him with all of their hearts. Mary and Martha said, "Hey, man, Jesus, how come you didn't come on time? If you would have come on time, my brother would not have died." Ever been disappointed by someone you love? Ever been disappointed by someone who hasn't performed or hasn't come up to your expectations? Last Wednesday, my wife told me that I didn't measure up. I know that's hard to believe. We were getting ready for the Maundy Thursday service, and I said, the whole day is for you. I'll just hang out when you're, and I was the whole day hanging out, but people kept coming into my life, and I didn't bother to call my wife to find out what she needed me to do. Oh, Wednesday night was a long night. That's not quite the same circumstance, but it's the same idea that there are times in our lives when we have expectations. Mary and Martha had the expectation that Jesus was going to show up in time so that Lazarus wouldn't die. Ever had that happen in relationship to God and you? Have you ever experienced a time where you thought that God was going to speak, or thought that God was going to be involved in your life, or do something in your life and He didn't do it? Has that ever happened to you? I remember back when, you've heard me tell the story before, but back when I was a Bible scholar. Okay, I really wasn't a Bible scholar. Back when I went to seminary, and I believed that God had directed me into the ministry, and I believed that that's where He wanted me to go. And so I'd gone out to this seminary out in Portland, Oregon. I pulled up stakes. My wife and I left everything we had here and went out to Oregon. And they had this class called Baby Greek. Baby Greek wasn't baby, but it was required for my master's degree that I had to have that class done before I could go on for the rest of my training. And I remember that quarter coming to the reality that the Greek language was not a language that was one that I really celebrated. I came to realize that just like I discovered in high school, that a foreign language was not something that came easy to me. And so I immediately turned to God and I said, God, you and I got a problem. Please, give me the ability to understand this language so that I can move on to do what I feel you've called me to do. God didn't show up. And as you all know, I went on to take Greek 5 times and never did successfully finish that class. Sometimes in our lives, I can, in Mary and Martha's life, I can understand why when you think God is going to do what you think God is going to do, and you plan things. In fact, we as a church are looking forward to the future, and we begin to plan things. But the question is, are they our plans or are they God's plans? And sometimes God doesn't work the way we expect Him to work. But the incredibly fascinating thing was, God didn't meet Mary and Martha's standards. But when Mary and Martha came to Him, He said to them, hey, let's go check out the gravesite. By the way, there's only a few scriptures in the Bible, or a few times in the Bible, where Jesus cried. And He cried over the death of Lazarus. Even though He knew what was going to happen, even though He knew what He was going to do, He cried because He felt the pain of Mary and Martha. He felt the agony that they felt. So we went to the graveside, and Jesus made the comment, do you believe that your brother will live again? And Mary said, well, yeah, of course. At the end times, God will raise him up again, and yeah, he'll live again. And then He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And at that point, He stood before that gravesite, that stone that was blocking the entrance of the resting place for Lazarus. He said, roll the stone away. And Mary said, I think the King James says, but Lord, he stinketh. I like that. But Lord, he stinketh. He's been in the ground 4 days. And so Jesus says, roll the stone away. And when he rolled the stone away, Jesus called Lazarus forth. Now I introduced the Easter story with that setting because that setting was when Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He said, this is my identity, and that there is nothing that can bind me or hold me down, because I can do, because I'm God, I can do the impossible. I can raise Lazarus from the grave. I can bring life back into that which is dead. So we roll forward a few days. And Jesus gets to Jerusalem, and he gets on the back of a donkey, and he begins to ride into Jerusalem. And I said last week that there were three types of people that were sitting in that crowd. There were the people that were his disciples, his followers, that were devoted to him, and they were excited about him going in because all of a sudden he was going to do something great. They were going to become independent from Rome. And then there were those who came because they had heard that Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead. He had heard that Jesus could do miracles. And so they came to see this great performer of acts of the impossible. And then there were the religious. I just find it so fascinating. The religious leaders of the day were ticked because Jesus was healing. Jesus was not only healing, but he was stretching the rules that they had put in place that we have to follow. And Jesus said to them, so that day when when he was going into the city of Jerusalem, they were excited about his entering. Some were, and some were there as spectators, and some were, Hosanna! Glory to God in the highest, King of kings, Lord of lords. It was that kind of a chant going on. And then, 4 days later, the chant changed. Those who followed him left him. We're told that the chant changed from Hosanna to the King of Kings to crucify him. Crucify him. And the followers of Jesus that had been close to him, they all ran off. And those who had fair-weathered friends who had come to celebrate his entrance now had changed their tune, and they were saying, we want to see someone hang on the cross, crucify him. And the religious of the day were ecstatic because this menace to their religious practices was gone. So Jesus was crucified. And in the midst of that crucifixion, those who believed in him wrestled and struggled with what was happening and why was this happening. The Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious leaders were saying, yes, we won one. Take one for the giver. And then the multitude had just kind of lost sight and gone on to find someone else that they could make into a hero. 3 days, we're told, for 3 days, the disciples went into the upper room and they hid themselves. They hid themselves because they were afraid if they went out, the religious leaders of the day would take them out and string them up and kill them as well. So they hid. And they all sat around in that room and are wondering to themselves, what happened? What happened? What do we do with this? Maybe, just maybe, some of them remembered the story of Lazarus, where he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And they're saying to themselves, wait a minute. Didn't He say, I am the resurrection and the life? Didn't He say that didn't we believe that He was the Son of God? How could this happen? That the Son of God, the resurrection and the life could possibly die? How could that happen? And can you imagine what it must have felt like to go to the graveside and to find the stone rolled away and the body that they had laid there 3 days earlier was gone? What would you have thought? Happens to my keys all the time. I put my keys down somewhere and I come back and they're missing. I guess keys wouldn't be exactly a good example, would it? But what would happen if you knew that something had happened, then all of a sudden something totally different happened? You ever had that kind of an experience? That's what it was for the disciples. They wondered, what has happened? Mary ran back to the disciples and said, someone stole Jesus' body. Where is He? What happened to Him? Power of the story is that Jesus demonstrated by His presence that I am the resurrection and the life. He demonstrated by His resurrection that He is Lord. He died and became new again. Last Thursday night we had a cross, and in that cross we had people nail nails, and we had them put a red ribbon on the nails, and I said to them, the red ribbon describes us, because you see, all of us sin, all of us fall short of the glory of God, all of us are failures. None of us can reach heaven, even to the best of the best. Even if we obey all 10 commandments, we're going to fail somewhere. And I said that by nailing that cloth onto the cross, we are proclaiming, we are acknowledging that it was us who put Jesus on the cross. It wasn't the Jews. It wasn't the Romans. It is us who put Him on the cross. We are responsible. So we nailed Him on the cross. And then one of the children made comment about the fact that what was hanging on the cross was a butterfly. And a butterfly symbolizes for me in a very physical way what happened. That Jesus Christ died, was put into a cocoon, and came back to life. And you know, it isn't just an illustration of Christ. You see, Christ had to come back to life. He had to die and He had to come back to life so that we could have forgiveness. Because if He hadn't, we wouldn't be able to be forgiven. But you see, that's the power of the story of the cross. The power of the story of the cross is that He did die. And then He did come back to life. And because He came back to life, because He died and because He came back to life, He became the author of the demonstrator of I am the resurrection. And in me and me alone you can find forgiveness and hope. In me and me alone. And so that which had been put into a cocoon came back to life. And that's us. For those of us who've accepted the reality of God's forgiveness, for those of us who acknowledge Christ as the risen Christ, as the one who has died for our sins, for those of us who understand who He was and why He was here, why we've accepted that, for those of us, we have been made new. We are no longer cocoons. We are no longer sinners. We have been forgiven. We have been pardoned by the cross. And the resurrection that Christ speaks of is a resurrection not only of His own body, but the resurrection of all of us who believe. He takes the old, Paul says, and He makes it new. This Easter morning, I want to ask you, Do you believe? Do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and life? Do you believe that Jesus came, lived, died, and was resurrected for the purpose of making us into butterflies? Do you believe that we have been made new? That is the message of Easter. It isn't just a holiday where we celebrate. My kids are coming over today, and we're going to have thousands of pieces of candy and bunnies and all that stuff. And I'm going to be sicker than a dog by tonight. I'm going to break the Daniel plan, Ken. 10%. Thank you. I might be working on 20. That's an inside joke. But it isn't about family getting together. I noticed this morning a lot of families are here with their parents. I think it's cool. But it isn't about being a family event. This is about celebrating a holiday of renewal. We have been made new. We have been forgiven. We no longer are what we once were because of the cross. We have been made victors over the death. Because of the cross, we have been resurrected. So pull out a slice of ham. I find it so interesting that ham would be the meal of the day on Easter. Come on. Passover is not about eating ham because ham was offensive to the Jews. But all of us Christians, we must be in defiance of those Jews because we're all eating ham. Can I see how many are having ham here today? Look at those hands! Whatever happened to turkey? You had ham yesterday. And I want you to know that we're having ham and leftover chicken. A lot of leftover chicken. Tomorrow! We got enough to feed everybody. Do we believe? Do we believe that Christ came to give us new life? That Christ came to transform us into something new? You see, that is the message of the gospel. Good news! I have made you new! You are resurrected by the power of Christ's death on the cross. Do you believe it? And if you believe it, are you living it? Let's pray. Father, I thank you this morning for the opportunity of gathering in this special day to celebrate a resurrected Christ. To celebrate a Christ who not only was resurrected himself, but also has provided a provision for us that we might too be resurrected. For us to know that there is new life. The old has been put aside. Our failures and our weaknesses and all those stupid things that we've done in the past and even those stupid things we're going to do in the future. You paid for them all on the cross. You have made us new. You have taken us out of the cocoon and has renewed us and refreshed us that we might fly with the wings of a butterfly. From a caterpillar to a butterfly. May we celebrate this morning the butterfly. And may we, as Jesus asked Mary, do you believe? May we answer, yes, I believe. Yes, I know that I've made new. Yes, I have a living hope. May we believe. In Christ's name we pray. Now, see? Where's Monty? He's a bad influence.